This episode of Recording Studio Rockstars is brought to you by OWC, Spectra 1964, Atom Audio, Isotope, JZ Microphones, and Solid State Logic. You're hearing my voice right now on the JZ V12 microphone through the Spectra 1964 STX100D mic pre and C610 complementer with Isotope, RX, Ozone, and Neutron, all recorded safely onto an OWC SSD and mixed on Atom Audio monitors. So please remember to check out our awesome sponsors using the link in the show notes below. It's a great way to help support this show. And now, get ready to rock.
If you want to be a session player, if you want to be go out on the road, you need a certain level of dexterity. So what people get away with many times in the studio today is they don't have that particular level of dexterity that was more common back then. But you need it if you're going to compete on a professional level like that.
Welcome to Recording Studio Rockstars. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is the podcast created to help you become a rock star of the recording studio. No matter where you like to rock in the galaxy, the OWC Envoy Pro Electron lets you record up to 2 terabytes over USB-C with speeds of up to more than a gigabyte per second, transfer your tracks in a flash, and take your samples and sessions with you to the studio or stage. The OWC Envoy Pro Electron is your waterproof, dustproof, and crush-proof SSD that you can rely on. Use our custom link in the show notes to help support this podcast at macsales.com/rockstars. If you've ever wondered how I get a consistent sound quality mixing hundreds of episodes of Recording Studio Rockstars, it's because I've been cheating by using Isotope, RX, Ozone, and Neutron on every single episode. Right now, you're hearing on my voice RX breath control, declick, declip, DS, deplosive, voice denoise, Ozone multiband compression, Neutron EQ, and limiting, all from Isotope. Check out the subscription option with an extended 30-day free trial at isotope.com/rockstars or use the code ROCK10 to get 10% off any individual plugin purchase. Howdy Rockstars, it's your host Lid Shaw, and welcome back to Recording Studio Rockstars, bringing you into the studio to learn from recording professionals so that you can make your best record ever and be a rock star of the studio yourself. My guest today is Bobby Owsinski, a producer, engineer, and one of the best-selling authors in the music industry with 24 books that are now staples in audio recording, music, and music business programs in colleges around the world, including the Mix Engineer's Handbook, Social Media Promotion for Musicians, and the Music Business Advice Book. He's also a contributor to Forbes as a category expert on the new music business. His long-running production and music industry blogs have won numerous industry awards, and he's appeared on CNN and ABC News as a music branding and audio expert. Bobby's highly rated Inner Circle podcast is now in its 9th year with more than 400 episodes that feature mover and shaker guests from all parts of the music industry. Sounds a little bit familiar here, except we're a little more studio focused. He's also recently produced and mixed albums that appeared at number 2 on the Billboard Blues Charts and number 5 on the Apple Music Rock Chart. And his new book update is out, Mixing Engineer's Handbook, 5th edition. Bobby, of course, has also been a guest on this podcast back on episode 10. And I've had the honor of being a guest on your podcast numerous times as well, Bobby. So please welcome back Bobby Owsinski to Recording Studio Rockstars. Bobby, my man, are you ready to rock?
You bet. Episode 10. I didn't realize it was that far back.
Yeah, I was trying to remember, had we done it even more than that? You were an early guest on the podcast. I really appreciate that. It's probably why it is doing well and still here today.
Boy, I'd like to think that's true. I don't know if it is.
It's all about who you have on for your first shows. Now, so tell us, on the first time you were here, we kind of covered some of your origin story and things like that. So maybe we can be a little more recent. what is new for you in your studio these days? I mean, you're sitting in a home studio, I believe, and you're, making music, but you're also creating tons of content, whether it's, doing podcasts, doing video production. You have an incredible list of helpful courses, and you're writing books. So tell us about your workspace. We love to hear about workspace.
Okay, my workspace. It's a bedroom. It's the worst size you can think of. It's almost square. But in fact, it works, and it works well. And the reason why is because of the ASC tube traps that I have all over the room. So I bought these maybe 20 years ago because I was moving places all the time. I was moving offices and studios and whatever, and it was just an easy portable way to take it with me and always have some consistency between rooms. And sure enough, it works incredibly well. I do have, 6 other sound panels in here as well. And between that and, there's a bookshelf over there that kind of acts as a diffuser, and the room sounds really good as a result.
Now, is that the same thing as an attack wall, or is that a different brand?
No, an attack wall is just the way you set up the tube traps.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Because Josh Harris was just on the show. In fact, we just did the interview, and he has the same. He has the tube traps, and sets them up as an attack wall, and really swears by it. And I've heard them; they sound really great.
I have a semi-attack wall. The real attack wall is all across the front, and I found the difference between having tube traps in the center right in front of you and not having them, it's not all that much. So I just have them flanking my speakers, my monitors, and on top, and then in the back, and then in all the corners of the rooms, which you can't see.
Are tube traps something that are still being made today?
Yeah, they are. And the interesting thing is they're a combination of a trap, as it says, and an absorber. So and a diffuser as well. If you turn it around one way, it diffuses, and if you turn it the other way, it's absorption.
So did you intentionally have certain areas of the room absorb and certain areas diffuse?
Yeah, I played around with it to see what's going to work right, and I've gone through all sorts of iterations.
Yeah. And then your kids come in, or other people come in and just like spin them around when you're not looking. You're like, what's wrong today with the sound?
Yeah, nobody comes in here but me.
So if I was just to guess, I would imagine, in fact, we were talking about this recently, but that, the near reflections of the speakers confuse our ear more than the distant reflections. Somebody suggested that. So I would almost imagine that setting them up kind of like a live and dead end room, like if it was the absorption around the speaker area, but behind you was diffuse, that might work well in a mixing environment.
Yeah, I'd have to say it's semi-diffuse. And, behind me, there is a sound panel back there as well, and one on the door. But again, it was trial and error. But, even with the best designers, the best studio designers, it's all trial and error at the end for them. I mean, they can get everything in the ballpark, but when it really comes down to fine-tuning things, as you well know, there's a lot of, well, let's try this. Oh, that didn't work. Let's try this now.
It's a little bit like tuning a guitar, right? Sometimes people take for granted that a tuner is the answer, and it's like, no, the guitar tuner is where you start.
Yeah.
And then you use your ears and you fine tune it until it's finally in tune. What are some other tips you would share for somebody if you must have this question a lot, where somebody comes along and just says, I got a home studio, what can I do to set up my control room? Maybe that's too broad of a question, but
no, it isn't actually. It's funny when I get studio designers on my podcast, they all tell me the same thing. They say, oh, what you're showing people is kind of old. It's not what we do anymore. But I say, yeah, but what you do is a lot more expensive.
Right.
So, but the simplest and easiest thing to do is build what they call an RFZ, reflection-free zone. And this is soft walls, absorbers on your sides and above you. And if you can do that, and you don't need a lot of traps or a lot of sound panels. I have 2 on each side and one above me, and that works pretty well. And it's always worked that way, and it's still, no matter what, it will, even though there are probably better ways to do it. But
So
you can do this for $150 if you can swing your own hammer. So,
right.
it's not so bad.
So the reflection that we're referring to would be you're sitting where you want to sit when you're mixing, when you're listening, for example, and you're probably, it's going to be 2023 as this comes out. So you're going to probably be sitting in front of a desk with a computer on it of some sort. And that means your speakers are in front of you and you want to hear the sound come out of your speakers, not the sound of your speakers bouncing off the walls that are adjacent or the ceiling.
Yeah.
They're going to bounce off the desk a little bit, but that's one you kind of have to just live with, I think, right?
Yeah. The other thing is monitors too. In this case, my monitors are kind of close, so it's bouncing a little bit off the back of the monitors, but I try to keep the tweeters away from that, so that kind of helps.
Yeah. So then the first trick for making sure that it's not bouncing off the wall is the old mirror trick.
Yeah. Yeah. It still works.
Yeah. So you want to explain what that mirror trick is?
Well, you put a mirror up on the wall, and wherever you can see the tweeter, that's where it's going to bounce off of. So you make it soft.
Right. And it's almost like if it looks like the speaker's close in the mirror, then that's a good place for a panel. If somebody put a mirror on the back of the studio and you looked and you're like, God, that's so far away, you might just instinctively go, well, we'll probably be fine then, right?
Yeah, yeah. But again, it depends how big your room is. And like I say, I'm in the worst possible room because it's almost square. And as anyone who knows even a little bit about this, that's something you're not supposed to do. But I was forced to because that's all I had available that was kind of easy, and it actually worked out just fine. So the moral of the story is, if you have what would be thought of as a bad environment, the way around it is lots and lots of absorption, but not so much that it sounds like you're in an anechoic chamber. Then it's a little too much, but lots of absorption can overcome a lot of that.
Yeah, you don't want to suck the air out of the room.
Yeah.
I've got a dead room in my studio that just looks beautiful, and I think it's really cool. But I do notice that when I go in, my voice just sort of disappears in a space like that. When I think about at times I've seen plans where BBC would put out these standardized designs for rooms. You probably know a lot more about this than I do. And they would show you, it's like, okay, here's what a standard vocal booth should be, and here's how you do the treatments and what the walls need to be and everything. And I think that stuff is maybe even still available on the internet, but it's fascinating to go see that and just realize it's like, I think the voice needs some reflection, a certain amount of reflection back to support the sound.
Well, of course, for the BBC, they're talking radio and they're talking television. And in general, those studios, those type of studios have a much, they're much deader to begin with, and the decay time is much, much less.
Right.
And then in a music studio where it's a little livelier, but, in a voiceover studio, for instance, you want to keep that really dead.
Yeah. Another thing that I've experienced is working in many different home studio environments, whether it was my own or whether it was a band and we were, relocating to do part of a record somewhere. But you begin to hear what all these different spaces, sometimes somebody was singing in a hallway. Sometimes somebody's singing in my kitchen doubles as a vocal booth down in the studio. And there's no way that my kitchen is correct, but it's actually kind of fun to sing in, and it can sound really cool. And it's like, I think it's good for us to remember that, in a control room, like we started talking about, like your space, you want a controlled, it's built into the term, right? You want a controlled sound, but in the recording spaces, they become like instruments. So you can really be a little freer in your thinking about what should the sound of each room be and what's appropriate.
I think the other thing that people confuse when we begin to talk about this is the difference between acoustics and isolation. They're two different things. So just because you make something sound acoustically good, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to have the isolation that you want, and vice versa.
Yeah. People will always, they'll lead with the question. It's like, hey, what do I need to do to soundproof this place? And then you're like, well, let's start with, what do you mean? So here, I'll throw out a good twist for you, curveball. My brother's doing a music school, and he started out with what I think they refer to as a white box in Brooklyn. So this would be a construction that is just basically a big empty space that you lease. Now you go in with your architects and you build it into what you want as far as the layout. And it was incredible. I walked in with him, and it's like the greatest reverb I'd ever heard. It's so long. So I shot a couple of videos of me in there. I need to go post that stuff. But one of the challenges was, they were trying to figure out, okay, well, if it's going to have a soundproofing, in other words, we don't want to bother the neighbors in another leased space. They went and measured, and they said, okay, I think the threshold is like, 60 decibels. It can't go over that in the next neighboring space. And I was remembering, well, did you measure it? I think they're banging a snare drum, so they're trying to take the loudest thing they can think of. Then the next question is, did you measure it with all the reverb going on in the space? Because just the simple act of deadening it down is going to make that sound transfer even lower. So there is a correlation between sound treatment and sound transmission. I don't remember what the formula is for that, and I'm already out of my depth on this one, but it was just interesting to remember that and think about like how you would find out first, if you fill up a space and kind of deaden it out a little bit, and then find out what the transmission is before you build, a fancy double wall or a fancy double ceiling.
Of course, again, the problem is the frequency response, because low frequencies, they tend to travel through floors and everything, and that's what bugs people. It's not so much the high frequencies.
Yeah. Low frequencies don't care about nothing.
Yeah.
But we care a lot about low frequencies. How often do you get the question about getting the low end right in a mix?
Oh, yeah, that's one of the main things. Sure. And I approach this in my courses and in my books, a lot, because that's something everybody cares about. And let's face it, even when you become a pro, you care about it. I know some of the best mixers in the world, and that's what they work on all the time. There's no given for that. It's just something that takes a little bit of time and effort.
Well, we should probably circle back and talk about some of that stuff. And I've queued up some general questions from the rock stars too, that I think I might, browse through and see if we can pick out some good ones for you. But speaking of mixing, rock stars, I have a playlist of Bobby's work in the show notes, so please scroll through and go listen to that. And in listening to this, I was really struck by some of the stuff you've done. You've done some pretty amazing stuff, Bobby. You've got The Kids Are All Right by The Who in there. Now, I think these are, I'll let you explain what the context was for all this stuff.
Yeah. A lot of those were surround mixes that I did. And which, you're going to hear the stereo ones for the most part. But what happened was, when surround sound first came out, 5.1, I was one of the first people to get into it. So as a result, there weren't many people that knew how to do this. And I got all this major label work. And
nice.
Well over 100 really, really, really good records to do. It doesn't mean that I had all the elements to work with all the time. And it also means that sometimes the elements were rather minimal. But it was fun to do all that, and it was fun, to work on it. It also doesn't necessarily mean that the artists were there, because sometimes they were. Weird Al came in. I remember
nice.
that. And contrary to his demeanor, he's a very quiet guy. He just sat in the back and answered all his fan mail, and every now and then made a comment, and that's it.
That's great. Did you bring an accordion? So some of the other ones on your list, the Ramones, Hendrix, Thin Lizzy, Todd Rundgren, Pantera.
Yeah.
So that must have been a lot of fun, though. I mean, were you still working from multi-tracks and having to essentially recreate a mix that felt familiar to you as the original stereo mix did?
Many times, yes, but it wasn't always 24 track. There were even times when I was just given the stereo master and said, given the charge to make this 5.1.
Nice.
So we came up, and this is before you had, up mixing boxes and algorithms and things like that. So we came up with a way to do it using the existing studio and basically shooting a lot of this out into the studio. And depending how you mic it, you could really make it sound pretty realistic and still keep the punch of the original together. That's one of the problems when we have with immersive, for instance, talking about Atmos mixes. Mm-hmm. And I've heard a lot of really big records that were done. And many times it doesn't work because when you take something that sounds so good in stereo and all of a sudden it gets spread out all over the room, you kind of lose the glue and the punch and the feel. And it's interesting because it's spread out, but on the other hand, it's not what made us really like the song.
Now, are you referring to having an experience like that when listening to it folded back down into stereo or listening to it in an actual Atmos setup?
Oh,
do you think there's a difference?
Actual Atmos setup. I believe that Atmos is fantastic for games, and it's fantastic for movies, and it's fantastic for EDM, electronic music. When it comes to rock, for instance, or any kind of acoustic stuff, not so much. Not so much. Now, I will say this. I recently heard the Atmos mix of the Beatles' Revolver. And this was at a special presentation done at Universal Music. And the presentation was given by Giles Martin, who had done this. He had done several. He had already done Sgt. Pepper's, for instance. So he had a lot of experience. Now, this Revolver was done on 4 tracks. First track was the band, 2 guitars, bass, and drums. Tracks 2 and 3 were vocals. Track 4 was guitar solos and percussion and miscellaneous. So he had the advantage of having Peter Jackson's separation technology. And it worked so well, he could even pull a snare drum out of that. Now just imagine a mix of guitar, bass, and drums on one track. And he was able to separate everything out into separate elements.
Wow. And that separation technology is what they were using on Get Back as well?
Yes, it was the same thing.
Wow.
Now, they had access to it. The rest of us humans don't. But that being said, this was done very tastefully, where the only time you noticed that there was something going on was a special effect. And in other words, all of a sudden it was thrown around a room or something. But for the most part, you just got the feeling that everything was in front of you. You were listening to the band, and it was quite enjoyable. On the other hand, I've heard some recently where it would start out with guitars hard left and hard right, and it just never got the feel of the band or the original record. And, that's a shame.
The JZ Microphone Vintage series are built by hand in Latvia, featuring the patented Golden Drop capsule design for enhanced clarity that will give your recordings that classic vintage tone. You're hearing my voice right now on the JZ V12 mic. Our friends at JZ Microphones have come up with a special offer only available to Recording Studio Rockstars listeners, so use the limited time coupon ROCKSTAR to get 40% off the V67, V47, and V12 microphones. Go to jzmic.com and get your vintage mic now. Are you recording your own music or other people's music in your studio, but you're having trouble figuring out how to get your mixes to sound great? Do they sound weak and distant or lack punch and clarity? Well, I've got a gift to help you take your mixes from sounding like basement demos to sounding like professional mixes. And it's my free course called Mix Master Bundle. This course will show you how to get pro-sounding mixes from your home studio with free and stock plugins in Pro Tools. And the best part is that these these mixing techniques will work for you in any DAW, whether you're in Logic, Cubase, PreSonus Studio One Reaper, or whatever you're using. Are you ready to make your best record ever? Then go to mixmasterbundle.com to get started for free now, and you can find the clickable link in the show notes of this episode. It's tricky because what we're describing here is a tradition that starts with a mimic of a performance of people who are in front of you that was learned. We learned how to capture that in mono, then we learned how to capture that in stereo and recreate an experience. And now we've got this opportunity to create something that's immersive that maybe, as you're describing, maybe the appropriate version is, it still sounds like they're in front of you. It just sounds like we're in more of a realistic environment or something that makes us feel like we're suspended a little bit more. But when music, you talked about electronic music, when music becomes something where it no longer needs to look like an apple, it can just be anything. I think it could be pretty fascinating. And, I'm curious to hear when these immersive mixes get really bold and explorative and artistic in that way.
Well, I've heard a bunch that are like that. And on the other hand, one of the best ones was Revolver, where it was subdued, gentle is a good way to put it. And it worked. It worked very well.
Yeah. Have you had a chance to mix in Atmos yourself yet?
Yeah, I've dabbled a little bit. And I'm still not to the point where I'm going to invest in a room. And to be honest with you, in my room would be a little difficult anyway, although it can work. Everybody starts on headphones, Yeah, I talked to Andrew Sheps, and he said first 6 months he did everything on headphones before he jumped in himself. So everybody starts that way. You can. It's easy. It's fairly cheap. You can get a feel for it. But the real problem is it does sound different, and there's a lot of things that are peculiar to a binaural Atmos mix than from a discrete mix that you get. So what could sound great on one doesn't necessarily translate to the other. And that's kind of scary.
Yeah, because the model is built on that idea that everything can fold down. I guess maybe the good news is that the model can improve as software updates happen in the future, and it can just get more. It can somehow be more of an appropriate match from a full thing. I've definitely heard some headphone mixes. I probably just checked, whatever my iPhone was telling me to check out in my earbuds. And I thought that was interesting. And then I've heard some great Atmos setups, like I believe it was David Leonard playing hit mixes and listening over at Blackbird when they had all that stuff set up. And it's cool. It's cool stuff. And then, of course, my buddy Chris James has played me some of his work, and it sounded amazing in his studio. So it's fun stuff. But I guess rewinding a little bit, since most of us aren't mixing in Atmos yet, maybe we need to talk about mixing for those of us who are mixing in home studios and pro studios. You just have the 5th edition of the Mix Engineer's Handbook come out. Tell us a little bit about that and what's new with your book.
Well, it needed an update. The 4th edition came out in 2017. And it was, I don't want to say it was thrown together, but it was a fast book. The reason why was all of a sudden I started to hear from colleges that were using it saying, we can't get your book anymore. And I went to the publishers saying, what's happening? And the publisher said, we don't think we want to be in this business anymore. And here's your titles back. So I didn't have to fight for them. That was good. But it also meant I had to turn out a book really quickly.
Right.
And so I did, and I updated it as best I could, but it was a little faster than I would have enjoyed doing it. So now, so much has changed since even the 5 years, the way we approach mixing. I tried to make this as current and as modern as possible. But I put a lot of stuff in that's evergreen, new ways to build your mix, for instance. There's more than one way to do it, and there's several really good ways that that, you can learn how to do it and, pick the one that works for you. So I have 4 different ways to do it. Ways of setting up your compressors. So I always taught the method of listening and then setting your attack and release. That works fine. But there is another way, and you can do it by numbers. You can look at the tempo of the track and figure out what that time ought to be and then dial it in. So that's one of the things we talked about there.
That's pretty cool. I've never done that.
Yeah, it works really well. Intelligent processors, for instance. Now we're in the world we're beyond just emulating the hardware of the past, the signal processing hardware of the past. We're beyond that. And now everyone's thinking outside the box, and AI is helping us along. So go over that. Editing techniques for playlists, because now playlists are so important. But you have to think about how you can get in that playlist and what's important about it, and how you can edit your song down in order to make it more attractive. So there's that in there. And of course, there's
Let me see if I understand what you're saying. When you say playlists, you mean like a Spotify playlist. In other words, the same thing as trying to have a radio mix. Now you might consider having a playlist mix.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, interesting.
The other thing is immersive audio, Atmos. I included a whole chapter just on that, and it's a nice primer on Atmos. Now, it's a deep subject, but if you want to get into it quickly, this is a good primer that will hopefully clear up many of the questions that people might have. And, there's new interviews, mixer interviews. There's, busting the myths of luffs when it comes to mixing, because there's lots of questions and myths about it, of, what you have to do and what you don't have to do.
The title of that one is Had Enough of Luffs.
I wish I would have thought of that. That's a good one. Yeah. Self-mastering, because that's a big thing now.
Yeah.
Don't recommend it, but if you have to, the budget says you do, there are ways to keep yourself out of trouble.
When you did the first edition of that book, was mixing in Pro Tools the way that many people were working? Or was it even prior to that?
It was pre-Pro Tools. It was still back in the tape machine console days.
Wow.
1999, yeah.
That's wild. Edition 500 one day. Very cool. Well, so can you share a story about creating that book? Share a story about writing or, stumbling on something that just sort of blew your mind.
Well, I think the biggest thing was educating myself about Atmos, because I couldn't have a new edition come out without something about it, and I just couldn't leave it at a cursory glance. So it meant I had to immerse myself in immersive.
Right.
And lots of brain cells died in the process. It's a big subject, and also you want to make sure you get the process right. But I was lucky to be able to talk to people at Dolby, and people at Avid that steered me in the right direction on everything. And again, it was a great education for me, and I hope I was able to elucidate it very well so people can understand it.
What do you see as far as Atmos in the future of music, whether it's as a creator and the career and putting that kind of music out, related to immersive, and also just the listener experience? Any more insights about what you see coming related to this stuff?
Immersive is here to stay, not necessarily for music, but for everything else. For music, it's big right now, and there's one reason that nobody talks about. The record labels are pushing it hard. Why? Because it's a new copyright. They're losing their old copyrights. This is a brand new copyright. So that means they're going to, and what's even better, one of the cool things about Atmos is it does fold down fairly well. So you can go, from a 7.1.4 or larger to stereo, to 5.1 to stereo to even mono, and it will fold down. It will sound reasonably good. So the record labels are thinking, okay, wait a second. So we have this new copyright and it will work on stereo all the way up. Okay. Now we don't have to worry if we lose the copyrights on the old versions. So that's why they've been pushing this hard. And it's kind of an underlying reason that not many people realize.
So in the same way that the advent of the CD meant, I guess that wasn't a copyright issue, or maybe it was, but the CD meant a whole new product line to sell people. This is a similar approach where there's a financial opportunity essentially to lock in value to the music for a long time.
Yeah, it's similar, but not quite the same. But yeah, I mean, they're looking to save their catalog essentially.
Yeah.
There's a downside though. The downside is they want to do this as cheaply as possible. So at first they went back to the original mixers who charged a bunch of dough, as they should. And then they began to think, well, wait a second. What if we just have the stems and we get some other people that just started this to do it? And as a result, they're paying like $500 a track, but they're getting people that barely have any experience mixing, let alone mixing in Atmos. The downside of that is the fact that you probably get some stuff that, well, you do because we've all heard it, some things that you go, this doesn't make sense. This is not a good representation of what this ought to be.
Right. Yeah, it's pretty remarkable to think about the large music industry essentially just lowballing people to clinch their next big product.
Yep.
So I can understand why maybe you haven't built your room yet.
I just talked to a major producer engineer yesterday who right out told me, he says, it's not worth my time for what they're paying me and what I have to do in order to deliver up to my standards. It's not worth my time.
I can almost see people with Atmos setups mixing brand new clients material and just mixing in Atmos the first time, and that being a better rate for stuff.
Yeah.
Than doing some of the high-end stuff. Or, when I say high-end, I just mean some of the high-profile remixes. That's fascinating.
I've also heard that many artists have actually turned down the Atmos mix. When they've heard it, they've said, no, this just doesn't work. It works in stereo, it doesn't work in Atmos. And they've forbid it coming out in Atmos.
Well, I'm very hopeful for the future of this stuff because I get excited. I think we all do get excited by technology and what's possible and, the visionary aspect of these things. Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. One of your great courses, which we have worked together on in the past, just like sharing some great tips in webinars and stuff like that, is 101 mixing tricks. Atmos, is Atmos going to make it into that?
No, to be honest with you, I've sort of retired that. And now it's Top 40 Mixing Secrets.
Oh, that's the new one. Okay, great. Tell us about Top 40 Mixing Secrets.
Well, a couple things influence that coming about. The first is, yes, I did that in 2015 or 16, and it needed a refresh. The second thing is 101 mixing tricks were too many for a lot of people. I just said, I'm overwhelmed. So I cut it back to 40 of the most important ones. And then finally, there was a lot of people that objected to the word tricks. And they'd say, these are not tricks, these are techniques. So that's kind of why I changed it. That being said, these are pretty good techniques from the standpoint that even if you just go through the first module, your mixes are going to sound better because the first module touches on all of the best, most important, and most asked for aspects, making your mix louder, making it punchier, making it translate to different environments, getting the reverb sounding right. So, and then we kind of do a deeper dive as we get into the other modules. Okay, this is just on vocals. This is on the other mix elements. Here's some special advanced tricks, side chaining, automation, things like that.
Yeah, I really enjoyed what I've seen of your teaching, and I love the way you showed a lot of things that were really eye-opening or ear-opening in mixing. And it wasn't sort of all about the newest, flashiest plugin. It was a technique, and it really was cool. And it was like, okay, that's very cool. That makes a lot of sense. And I'm just reminded too, there's so much to explore in making music and mixing and making records. And there's a lot more out there to learn than we realize at first, for sure.
It's not that I'm the expert. It's not that I'm so smart. I've stood on the shoulders of giants. I've had some of the best in the world show me you have the same thing in Nashville.
Yeah. You're a gifted teacher though, as well. I mean, I've seen your teaching is it's well paced and well delivered,
Thank you.
And that's a hard thing to do. Having taught myself too, it's hard. Sometimes I'm moving too fast, or I feel like I jumped too far forward. So your stuff is well put together. Also looking on your website, I noticed you've got Rockstars, which I recommend you check out. And that is BobbyOwsinski.com. So it's pretty easy to remember.
Yeah.
But you've got lots of articles and blog articles. You've had a long, long history as a writer too. You're writing, you're always kind of keeping up with what's new in music, what's new with the technology, also sharing, what's old in music, like as you said yourself, just these really important foundational elements. But one of the articles, just picking one right off the top there, you had one called 2 Methods for Creating Quick Mixes with Pink Noise. Is that something that you can give us a little insight into right now?
Pink noise mixing. Yeah. It surprisingly works. There's 2 ways to do it. Probably the best way is you just put pink noise on one track and you set it to the mix level that you'd like to have, -5, -6, -10, whatever it is. And then you start to bring your mix elements up one by one. Just about the time you begin to hear it above the pink noise, you pull it back. And you do this for every mix element. And then finally at the end, you turn the pink noise off and you go, it's surprising. This sounds pretty good.
That's awesome. I love stuff like that. Those are fun tricks to try. So you kind of bring it up above the clouds and then you just settle back into the clouds again. Like you're, like you are, what's the word I'm looking for? Like a secret agent, playing, and you're up there flying and you just got to duck down below the clouds.
Yeah. The other thing, and this is something that's in both my mixing courses and in the new Mixing Engineer's Handbook. I think I sent this to you. It was bugging me that so many people could not get a mix balance. And you can show people and you can explain how they should be hearing it, but they're not, and they're not getting it. So I remember back when I first started, one of the most common things to get mix balance on VU meters was you set your kick and your snare and your bass to somewhere between -5 and -7 on the VU meter.
I'm so happy you're bringing this up. That was one of my questions. That was my next question.
And I thought to myself, if you can do that in a VU meter, why can't you do that on a peak meter on a DAW?
Like our meter in Pro Tools, yeah.
Yeah. So I sat down and I kind of figured it out. That if you put your kick here and you put your bass here and you put your lead vocal here and you put all the guitars here and you put at this peak level, it's going to work. Now, is it going to be the final mix? No, but it's going to be really good and it's going to be in the ballpark and you can just tweak from there. So this is a kind of like mix by numbers, but it does really work.
It's amazing that we can create professional mixes using a computer in our home studios. But trying to mix with a mouse, it's like trying to play the guitar with the tip of a pencil. It sucks. And why shouldn't you be able to mix as naturally as you play the guitar? That's why I upgraded my studio to include the SSL UF8 fader pack and UC1 channel strip controllers. They let me mix as fast as I can feel the music. Go put the fun back into your mixes at solidstatelogic.com. Atom Audio introduces the all-new A7V monitor with rotatable HPS waveguide for the accelerated ribbon tweeter and advanced onboard DSP-based room correction using the included A-Control software or optional SonarWorks software with a measurement mic, allowing you to tune your speakers for your room, your mix position, and your ears anytime you want. Get the extended 5-year warranty for monitors that will improve as your studio improves at atomaudio.com. So when you shared this and I first learned about this, and I think you said that some of this originally came, some of the stories came down from Tom Dowd doing tricks like this, right, as well. I like to refer to it as mixing with your ears closed, which is great, you know.
Yeah,
which is you just and I did it. I followed your tips on that, and I just had the speakers off, and I just balanced, you know, the kick and the snare based on where the meter was peaking, and then added in the other elements. And I think I had to do a tiny bit of adjustment, but for the most part, the results were awesome. And I was like, and I went back, and these were rough mixes of a record I was working on. And I took it to the car, and I was like, this sounds killer. This is like the mix I was hoping it would be in the first place. The kick and snare were very full and punchy, and it was like, this sounds great, you know? So if the Rockstars want to check out that particular mixing technique, that's also on your website.
I think it is. I hope it is. I don't remember, to be honest with you.
All right,
sometimes
we might have to find it. If you don't find it, search for Rockstars. What do you think you might have called it if there was a title for it? Would it be like the Tom Dowd or the mixing with meters?
Mixing with meters, I think.
Okay. All right.
The thing with Tom Dowd, I didn't work with them and I didn't know him, but I know several people that did work closely with them, were his engineers. And Tom would sit down and be able to, with the monitors off, dial up a mix by just looking at the meters. And these are VU meters now. Now, we're in the back of, going back to 8 and 16 tracks, so it was far less complicated than today.
Right.
But my method, I tried it first on a 64-track wide mix, and you can go to 100, and you'll still get, you know, roughly the same thing.
Wow. Yeah, I think mine was just, you know, a couple of guitars, bass, drums, vocal, so pretty simple.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Let's see. What else do we need to talk about? I did not know Tom Dowd, but I did have the honor to interview Dana Dowd. She's been on the podcast as well.
Yeah, I just met her recently. Yeah.
Yeah, it's cool. That's Tom's daughter, and it was just cool to hear her tell stories about her dad and, you know, growing up around the studio and all that stuff. What are some of the other courses that you have on your website that the Rockstars should know about?
My main course is Mixing Accelerator. That's not up there because I only give that twice a year. And what it is, it's pretty intense. It's different than most other mixing courses. Most other mixing courses are just, okay, you have everything together. Now let's start a mix. But this goes beyond that because it teaches you how to listen, and it teaches you arrangement and production techniques, which are critical to getting a great mix, and most people overlook. So what ends up happening is they'll wind up with a bunch of tracks, and they'll try to fit them all together, where if you understand arrangement and how it doesn't matter what kind of, where it came from, what era, how hits are put together. And hits, they definitely have a form in the arrangement. Once you understand that, then you can start to go in and you can start to add, subtract parts, change the intensity. But your mix will get better and more interesting because you understand those basics. Now, once we go through that, then we go farther, and then I show you all the other things about mixing that you can do, starting from the fundamentals and then getting into, you know, some real tricks and you know, going down a rabbit hole a little bit and finishing up with mastering. Now, all that being said, this is more hands-on because you get time with me because you're sending me homework. I give you homework. You send it to me. I'll tell you, you know, as objective as I can, what you're doing right, what you're doing wrong. So make sure that you go through this whole thing and you're improving and you're understanding it as we go. So that's kind of like my high-end class, but that only happens twice a year. The next one I think will be in December.
How long does a class last for?
It's 12 weeks. There's 8 modules. But I found that if we did one module a week, it was overwhelming to some people. So we do one every 2 weeks. And what I try to do in between the weeks, I'll do some speaker workshops, some guest workshops. So I'll bring master classes, so to speak, and bring some really good people on to tell you how they do things.
That's fun. Yeah, I feel like 12 weeks is a good length of time to get something done. I like to think about my years in 12-week blocks and quarters now.
Oh, there you go.
It's very helpful. 3 months, rock stars. What are some of the basic elements of production that you find people need to learn about first? And when I say that, I'm referring back to what you were talking about, arrangement and the technique.
The one thing that's sorely missing from most songs that people send me is development of the song. So what happens is what they'll do is they'll get a great idea and they'll have 10 tracks and they're all playing the same thing all the way through the song. But that's not the way hits are made, or even songs that you like. They're not made that way. They breathe. They build an intensity. They have less intensity during the verses. They increase the intensity. The second verse is different from the first one. Second chorus is slightly different from the first one. The bridge is different. The bridge has more elements or fewer elements. And it's how the song breathes. The ear candy that's put in, that's what really makes the song. And it's the things that people overlook more than anything when it comes down to it.
So a good example of that for me was my first band in St. Louis, or one of my first bands, where I played fiddle parts. And I would come up with a great fiddle line that would, be an instrumental, it'd be an intro or be a tag or something, and it really rocked. But then I didn't understand that it was okay to go away when the singing happened in the verse. And so I think the best I could come up with was to play a lower part, but I basically just kept playing the same thing over and over again.
Yeah.
And it's funny to hear you describe it. It's like you come up with this part that you're psyched about, and then you just start playing it at the top of the song and you play it all the way to the end of the song and you hope everything's all right. But that's not really how it works, and it's like leaving things in, learning how to sit out on stuff is really helpful. You talked about the second verse. That felt like a more of an advanced feature for me. Like finally learning one day, it's like, oh, the second verse could have like a keyboard could be joining it, or some new instrument, some new element that lifts it a little bit. Percussion is another one. Like when I start putting percussion on a track, and then you start shaking, and then you're like, your arm falls off at the end of the song, and you're like, maybe I should have stopped shaking in there somewhere.
But that's such a real subtle thing, but it adds movement to the track, and it's really important. If you took it away, you'd notice.
Yeah.
There's one really for people like rock music and like Tom Petty. Refugee is one of my favorite songs. But if you take notice, there's a shaker that's in it, and it's barely audible, but it really makes the song. And then I heard this, but then I heard the story from Jim Keltner. And Keltner, he's a session drummer and percussionist, as everybody knows, and he wasn't in the band, but he was at the studio and he was listening through the door. And he walked in and he said, "Shaker." And he walked back out. And they ran after him and they said, What do you mean? What do you mean? He said, "The song needs a shaker." They said, "Well, come in and play it." And they were having trouble making the song work until he did that. And everybody lit up and it was like, oh, there it is. And that's the way, stuff like that works.
That's great. I heard a sort of similar story about the making of another one, Bites the Dust, that they were trying to get the track together for Queen and weren't feeling it. And then somebody suggested the reverse piano idea. And all of a sudden everybody was like, that's it.
Yeah.
I love stories like that.
Yeah,
well, let me see here. Another one of your articles, which is similar, was the common characteristics of a hit song in 2022. How have things changed about the nature of a hit song from, 30 years ago, 20 years ago to today?
Well, the biggest things were there were long intros and long outros ending in a fade. And there was a reason for
a New
those.
York fade or a California fade?
Well, it doesn't matter, and here's why. Radio was so important, and there needed to be space for the disc jockey to talk over. So what did they do? They gave him 10 or 15 seconds at the beginning and at the end by having these long intros and long outros. So now that radio isn't as important, we don't need those, and you don't have them anymore. So there you go. There's 20 to 30 seconds. It's off the song right away. The other thing is solos. They're rarely hear a solo today. So there you go. There's another verse that's out.
Now is that the nature of the song, or is that the nature of people forgetting how to play good solos?
Yeah, right. Yeah, I wonder, huh? Then bridges aren't what they used to be, where they're a completely different set of changes. Now what you might have is a verse that breaks down or partially breaks down, and that almost counts as a bridge. So the reason for that is because so many songs today, we're talking about pop hits mostly, they're built upon loops. And of course, You have the same change over and over and over, and the way you're changing the intensity is by adding instruments and vocals on top. So by breaking it down, then that's the way you get that bridge. So as a result, we have songs that are much shorter than they used to be and, have a different form completely.
I once asked a bass player friend of mine why or if groove songs had many chord changes in them. And he seemed to feel like a lot of times groove songs don't change. They're very simple in their chord progression. They don't really change it up in the bridges as well. And I guess my question is, do you feel like that's true also? And is it possible that modern productions are also similar in terms of being more groove-based, more dance-based? And does that affect the nature of a bridge?
That's all true, but the fact of the matter is when you get a bridge in a groove song, the melody would change. And we have a lot of songs today where that doesn't happen. The melody's kind of the same through the whole thing. Even in the chorus, and what you just have is additional vocals that kind of fill it up.
Do you see that as something appropriate, or do you see that as a missed opportunity in modern productions?
It's appropriate for now.
But what are some things that make it appropriate? I mean, you talked about the loop element, and maybe that is part of it. Maybe because the change isn't there, or maybe because the loop is dictating where you can go with this thing. You just got to stay there.
Yeah, pretty much. The other thing too is there are two ways to change intensity in a song. The real best way is when you have players playing together and they're pushing and pulling, and they're getting louder when they have to, and getting their intensity is increasing, and then it's diminishing. And that's the best way to do it, obviously. But pop songs aren't made that way. A lot of songs today aren't made that way. The intensity is changed by adding and subtracting mix elements. So you're adding a guitar, you're adding a keyboard, you're adding extra vocals. All of a sudden there's harmonies coming in, or you're taking them out. And that changes completely. So when we go to a groove song, a lot of those old groove songs, in fact, was the band changing the intensity at the right places. And that gave you, a different feel. It would give you more excitement or less excitement. They were able to change all that.
Okay, here's the next question. To China crash or to not China crash?
Drummer's choice, but drummer's choice, but
I'll put the ice bell in there with that too. There's a lot of junk that needs to get cleaned up in a podcast or music mix. Boomy pops on the microphones, piercing sibilants, background noise, harshness, distortion, wild dynamics, and EQ correction. And all this editing and mixing cleanup would be impossibly time-consuming were it not for the magic of iZotope RX, Ozone, and Neutron. iZotope gives you a collection of plugins for mixing in your DAW to manage plosives, clicks, S's, noise, buzz, reverb, breaths, and even guitar fret squeaks with set it and forget it simplicity. Check out the new Repair Assistant plugin to help you find the perfect mix prep settings for any instrument. And the standalone RX app includes new features like text transcription and multiple speaker recognition for easy editing and navigation. Try out the subscription option with an extended 30-day free trial at iZotope.com/rockstars or use the code ROCK10 to get 10% off any individual plugin purchase. The OWC Envoy Pro Electron is your super fast and rugged pocket-sized portable USB-C SSD that keeps your music safe in the studio or on the stage. With storage of up to 2 terabytes and speeds of up to more than a gigabyte per second, the OWC Envoy Pro Electron gives you high-speed audio data for recording and playback. Take your sessions and sample libraries with you anywhere you go. Built for reliability, the OWC Envoy Pro Electron is waterproof, dustproof, and crush-proof, so there's no need to worry about your music anymore. Find the new Envoy Pro Electron and all your storage needs at macsales.com/rockstars and use the custom link below in our show notes because it's a great way for you to help support this podcast. So thanks, Rockstars. Hey, Rockstars, we're back now for the jam session. My guest today is Bobby Owsinski, joining us from his studio in Burbank, California. And I think we'll jump in and ask some questions from the Rockstars. So I usually try and collect some of the great questions about what's your biggest frustration in the recording studio. And I get quite a variety of questions from people. So if it's all right with you, Bobby, and you, Rockstars, let's just jump into some of these questions and see where they get us, because I know you're great at answering questions, Bobby.
Well, rock on.
All right. So this one comes in from Martin Moss, and Martin's question was, in most of my recordings of my band Tigre Blanco, there's a huge riot of a fight in the mid-lows. The lead singer's voice, his guitar, the cajon, my bass, they all want to shine and be heard. And the number one struggle is to get mixes to sound open, natural, spacious, uncompressed, and big, and still have punch and drive. We're just throwing in the kitchen sink there for you. There's a second part to the question, but we'll just stick with that for now. That can't be the first time you've heard a question like that.
No, but it's an easy fix. High pass filter.
Take some of the lows out of some of the instruments, right?
Yeah, out of most of them, actually, because there's lots of frequencies that aren't needed and they just get in the way of especially your kick and bass. So, you can dial that stuff back pretty easily and then watch around 400 cycles and watch also proximity effects in 300, 400, 500 cycles there. So you might want to dial that back.
Yeah, I call that the boxy area. That's basically where to me, that's where the tonal information of most instruments seems to come from. It seems like the 1K is where we're most sensitive because it's the human voice as far as the, what the hell we're saying, pretty much. Yeah. But it's right underneath that down to, 300, 200, where the body and the tone of everything comes. So it all just sort of loads up right there. But so high pass filter is a way of removing the low end that is competing with the instruments that are supposed to have the low end.
Correct.
What about a cajon? I think that was mentioned in there. What are some things that come to mind for you for smart ways to record and or mix a cajon?
Well, again, the problem is if it's working in place of a kick drum, for instance, then this doesn't apply. But if there is a kick drum and there's a bass, of course, then you have to make sure that it kind of fits. So you're going to take away some of that extreme low end that's there. And again, you're going to want to, you look at whatever the frequencies for the bass are predominant. Now, what I always tell people is you want to EQ above 100 rather than below, because your bass frequencies are in the 110, 120 to 240, 250 range. And you find that if you have enough in there, then you tend to have a bass that will pop out of small speakers, but won't get in the way of the kick drum. And it'd be the same thing with the cajon. You have to watch that you don't conflict with that.
Now, is that also where the fundamental of a bass note is, or is this actually above the fundamental? And is a question like, where's the fundamental actually a little bit of a distraction?
Yeah, I would say, because obviously it's different with each key and each note, where it's at. I wouldn't worry about that so much. Just remember that you probably want less below 100 and more above 100.
Okay, cool. Well, gosh, there was something else I was going to ask you about that, but I forgot what it was. So I'll move on to the second part of the question. He says it's hard to step out of his normal way of mixing. I tend to make things sound good and true, but it's hard to get more unconventional and creative sometimes. What are some tips you have for just breaking our own bad habits?
I'm one of the worst at that, to be honest with you, getting in bed with the technique and staying with it for way too long. The best thing I can say is learning something new and then trying it. Finding a new technique that you'll go, oh, I can do that. An effects technique that will usually take you out of your space.
I mean, I love trying what you taught, Bobby, about mixing with your ears closed. I thought that was awesome. That was a blast.
Oh, your eyes closed. Yeah.
No, I'm mixing with your ears closed.
Oh, okay.
Is the way I say it. Because, I'm not even listening. I'm just looking at the meters. If I mix with my eyes closed, I actually couldn't do that trick.
Yeah. All right. You couldn't. Right.
But that it's so true. Just trying. That's what I love about doing this podcast. That's why I will never stop looking, asking dumb questions like, share a good mix trick, because we're trying to always break that mold, put a crack in the habits that we have so that we try something new and just have fun with it and see how it turns out. All right, here's another one. This one comes in from Don Custer. And the question is, oh man, I have this strange internal struggle happening where that prevents me from even opening a project to get started. I'm not sure where it stems from, but it's almost like a fear of failure. I don't want to open a session because it feels daunting, or like I'm not going to be productive enough and it's going to end in frustration. I find that when I can get into a session, it starts to flow and really not as bad as I thought it was going to be, kind of like a pull off the Band-Aid mentality. Some nights after work, I'd rather go have a few drinks at the bar instead of going home and getting down to business, which results in me feeling resentment towards myself. So long anecdote short, I suppose the most frustrating thing in my studio is just getting started. Is that something you hear people talk about at all, as far as, that's almost blank page writer's block syndrome, right?
Well, that stems from confidence or lack thereof. You're not confident in what you're doing, so you don't want to get started because you're not sure you can make it work the way you want. And confidence is super important. It's something that everybody struggles with, even the best mixers. And I've talked to many platinum and A-list mixers that would say, I just hope I'm not found out one day. So this is something that the confidence, the more you can get something sounding good and do it on a more regular basis, the more confidence you'll have that I can do this and it's going to go faster and better than I thought.
Yeah. I also find one of the best ways to put it out there and to admit your lack of confidence is to start a podcast. So this is me being out there, rock stars. Get over that hump that way. And then, learning to just, It's like Bobby, when you've done something enough times and you've struggled with it and you get past it, you just start getting used to the fact that when you go in to do something and you don't know how it's going to get done, you learn to just trust, well, I'll figure it out. I'll figure out a way to do it. So I'm just going to get started.
Or you trust your instincts. One of the things that you find when you're under the gun and I have to have this done by tomorrow morning, then all of a sudden you find yourself trusting your instincts and trusting what you've done before and trusting it's going to work. And usually it does. So, that's a big thing. So, one of the best things you can do, that's another way to get out of this, give yourself a deadline.
Yep. Also, don't work on something so long that you just don't have any perspective. Also, just exhaustion, ear exhaustion. My ears get tired more quickly as I get older, I find.
Yeah, me too.
It makes that helps me want to get things done really quickly. Here's one from Steve Russell: monitoring, learning what transfers to other media beyond my headphones. So I think the question is, if I'm working in headphones, how do I learn? How do I get to a place where I can be confident that it's going to work on other speakers and stuff? I know Andrew Sheps, for example, has been a guest on the podcast talking about that, and you even brought him up. What other lessons have you learned about going from headphones to feeling confident on the other speakers?
Well, that's a tough one because your headphones are going to tell you something that speakers don't, and vice versa. So you're much better off getting something like Abbey Road Studio 3 from Waves, or one of those where it's a room emulation, and using that, because you'll find that will translate better than just raw headphones, what you're hearing. So I like Abbey Road Studio 3 to begin with, but a lot of people like some other ones. Let me see, what's one of the other ones? The big one, I can't think of what it is right now that everybody uses. Anyway.
Is that Waves NTS or something like that? Is that one of the ones?
Waves NX is part of it, but NX is just the headphone transfer function. But they have emulations of different rooms. There's Chris Lord-Alge's room. There's Abbey Road Studio 3. There's Ocean Way that they have, Ocean Way Studio A. And I like Abbey Road Studio 3 myself. But it's an emulation of one of the best mixing rooms in the world, and that's what you're hearing in your headphones. So you'll find that you'll get a much better mix that will translate easier using that than, just going from headphones, because it's a tough one.
I wonder if one day we'll be able to shoot out our own studio. If we like our studio a lot, like, for example, if I love my control room, I wonder if I could make my own headphone model that sounds like I'm mixing in my speakers in my studio.
Yeah, you probably could. All you need is you need enough samples. That's it's kind of a pain to do it, but you need enough.
Have you ever seen anybody do shooting out a room to create a recreation like that?
Only a video. I haven't physically been there.
That's wild. Cool technology. All right, so let me see here. What else have we got? We've got this one's a little bit of a curveball, but I'll ask it anyway. From Ryan Fitzpatrick, saying his biggest frustration is setting up a signal flow through a patch bay. So I remember that. I mean, that scared the shit out of me the first time I was in a studio. It was at Washington University. I'd taken the recording and synth class, and I looked over at the patch bay and I was like, what the hell is that? How do you see that coming up? And do you have any tips? Do you have an answer for that? My first thought is physical patch bay, but there's also the thinking of the digital patch bay, and there's the routing and the DAW, and there's all sorts of ways we have to think about signal flow.
Yeah, there's the virtual patch bays now that are out that are very cool, but they're all basically the same thing. It's how do you get something going from here to there and then back again? And unfortunately, there's kind of a standard, but not really, because there are certain studios that just don't kind of follow their own way of doing things. So what you have to do is kind of learn the patch bay, learn what goes in and what goes out. What I would say is the easiest thing. set up a signal generator. Take the output from the signal generator. It could be a separate output on the patch bay, but it could be just on a channel. And then just poke around on the inputs, find the inputs, and just see, okay, I can see the signal going in. And go through all of them. Make sure you see signal. And then that will get you comfortable on, okay, this is how I'm getting into the patch bay. Into that particular device.
And I think physically just thinking about simply actually connecting something, just pretend you've got 3 boxes in front of you and you need to go into one, out of that one, into the next one. And that's all a patch bay is. It was just, you're just taking, fundamentally, I think you're taking the backside of all these rack gear boxes and putting it on the front of a patch panel as little connectors, so you've got access to the inputs and the outputs of everything.
Now, what could be confusing is there's a lot of different patch points on the console, especially on each channel. So you can have line input, you can have insert input, you can have an output from different places, from an insert out, you can have it from the preamp out, you can have it, there could be, 6, 8 different places on each particular channel. So that doesn't make it easier. And what it does is giving you flexibility for that one time in 50 that you might have to use it. But it makes it more confusing.
And when I was in school, of course, we had to learn the flow chart of each console. So you visualize, the piece of paper and you can see where things are going. And that helps a lot. I mean, if you have a manual for whatever it is that you're trying to understand, look at it. There might be a flow chart written somewhere and it just be boxes with lines between them. And then when you see that, you're like, oh, I get it now. This EQ is right here in this signal path, and that'll help a lot. But I will tell you that you get into the digital consoles and it starts to make your head spin a little bit. I have the PreSonus Studio Live 64, and it's remarkable what's possible, but it takes me a moment to, train my brain to think about the routing differently,
Yeah, I started on Euphonics, with a virtual patch bay. And yeah, there are many hours of scratching my head. Lucky I had an assistant that, was much more hip to it than I was. That helped.
Do you want to record killer drums in your home studio? Rockstars of Drums will show you how to record, edit, and mix pro-sounding drums with examples from a Nashville session drummer in a Grammy-winning studio. Do you want to know how to master your own music at home? Rockstars of Mastering will show you how with plugins in your DAW so that your music will sound awesome when you finish your mixes. And if you're looking for a step-by-step solution for a pro-sounding mix that won't take years to learn, the Ultimate Mixing Masterclass with Craig Alvin will show you a proven method for creating Grammy-winning quality mixes that you can apply in your home studio right now. Or if you just need to learn the fundamentals of creating a great sounding mix, then register for my free course Mixmaster Bundle to get great mixes using simple free plugins. And get started now making your best record ever at recordingstudiorockstars.com/academy. Use the code ROCKSTAR at checkout to get 10% off any course for a limited time. Every studio needs a good vintage mic for that classic warm sound. Whether you're looking for those airy highs, sweet mid-range, or silky low-end, a good vintage mic can put the magic in your mixes. So it's no wonder vintage mics have been loved and praised by thousands of engineers for decades. The JZ Microphone Vintage Series are built by hand in Latvia using only the best electronic components and feature the patented Golden Drop capsule design for great detail and richness of tone that will bring that classic vintage vibe to your studio and be a real workhorse for your sessions. This time, our friends at JZ Microphones have come up with a special offer only available to you, Rockstars. Use the limited time coupon ROCKSTAR to get 40% off the Vintage Series mics V67, V47, and V12, the mic you're hearing right now, at jzmic.com. Now, when I use U-Control for my Avid S1 to talk to Pro Tools. Does that come from, is that a derivation of Euphonics?
Yeah, it is, actually.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Yeah, Euphonics was its own company at first, and then it was bought by Avid. It was bought by somebody in between. I don't remember who. But anyway, they had the first digitally controlled analog console, which was the CS300, which is a big one, or CS3000. And that also had the first virtual patch bay. And then they went to the System 5, which was all digital. And then it was, okay, this kind of works the same way as what we're used to, but it's a little different. And that's how a lot of us really got started on that.
Yeah. And I mean, really, we're talking about at the core of this, we're talking about understanding complexity. And the answer is always the same in a lot of ways. And it comes from lessons I would learn from a technician coming into the studio. And the answer is when there's something that's not right, or you can't figure it out, you always have to break it down to its smallest elements and go one at a time and figure out, if you're trying to chase a buzz through something, it's like you can't figure it out when you got 10 things patched in at once. You got to go to the first thing. Is it working? Okay, go to the next thing. Is that working? Okay. And same thing with mixing, it's like you got 10 plugins on a sound and you're not sure why it doesn't sound right. Turn them all off and turn them on one at a time and start exploring, what is this doing until you discover, oh, I screwed it up over here with this one.
Yeah.
All right. So here's a question from Timothy Svensson. Keeping up with all these changes in recording gear, softwares, and analog versus digital, I think that one's an easy answer. It's just follow Bobby and he'll keep you hip to what's new through your blogs and your podcast.
Well, thank you. Yes, that might help you, but do you have to? And the reason why I say that is I know many great mixers that are still on Pro Tools 10.5, and they don't change, they don't update, they don't do anything because what they have works.
Yeah.
And they don't feel they have to update. Many reluctantly do when there's no more support for, their computer or something. So there's nothing that says that you have to do it. Now, the only downside, if it's your music and if you're, creating, you can say whatever works for you. It changes a little bit if you're doing work for other people, because if you're mixing for somebody and you're getting mixes in, for instance, then you probably have to stay current, because you're probably getting stuff in that's current on current versions with current plugins and whatever. So you have to know about that. But if it's just you, find something that works, stay with it until you don't have to.
It's a little bit ironic because working with other people, you have you have both sides. You have stay current because you need to interface with everybody else, but also don't upgrade because you need to be super, super reliable.
Yeah.
And the more you upgrade, the more you try and keep up with the Joneses, the more times you're going to fire up your studio and go, why I swear to God, this was working yesterday. Why is it not working right now?
Yeah.
Okay. This one comes in from Bruce. I am not a drummer but I'm programming realistic drums. I use Easy Drummer. I prefer real drums, but it costs an arm and a leg to get real tracks laid down. My timing is not dead spot on, but not too bad. I sometimes miss the pocket with bass and rhythm. Also, I'm creating alone, and that is a bummer. So production is one-sided. Okay, it's not much of a question, but it's more of the frustration of trying to figure out how to create drums with digital stuff, and you can't record the real drums. What are some things? Immediately I think of one of the tricks that you taught, Bobby, which was taking a hi-hat that was programmed and putting more life into it. And you scrolled the randomizer feature across the Pro Tools screen, and all of a sudden the hi-hat just sort of started coming to life. What are some thoughts you want to share just about building and creating drums when you're using the computer to do it?
By the way, what that was it was randomizing both the EQ and the level slightly, which is what would happen with a real drummer, because all the hits are not the same.
Can it also mimic when the drumstick goes flying out of my hand and I'm like,
yes, if you have that sample. Really, the first thing is it comes down to the samples that you're using. So if they're real good, you're ahead of the game. So you won't have to do as much processing later. The second thing is the type of music. If you're doing something that's electronic music, for instance, that does demand that you be on the grid. If you're not, if you're doing something that's more organic, then you can be near the grid and you don't have to be completely on. But what does help is if everything else is kind of lined up with that. So the best way is wherever your kick drum and snare drum is, you take your bass and other instruments and you make sure the one is dead on with that. And then it will feel better. And any time kind of downbeat, they're all together, they're all hitting together or near together. I mean, you can get away with a few milliseconds in either side and still feel okay. But that's really important. But you don't have to be exactly on the grid. You can be close and it'll be all right.
Yeah. Have you seen people who are, so two thoughts about that. One is I'm always amazed at what these plugins sound like Easy Drummer. You press play on it, you're like, wow, that sounds incredible. But sometimes I also feel like it sounds a little bit too incredible for what I would do if I was just playing with my band or playing it myself. So have you found that people are successfully loosening up this professional element of it? Or have you found people tend to get like a little miniature, like electronic drum kit and hit pads to play parts in, or just use finger drumming on little drum pads and keys?
Yeah, more so that than actually going in and trying to electronically change it. One of the things that you can do is have the drums, for instance, very much on the grid, and other things that breathe, other mix elements, and then you get kind of the best of both worlds. It feels very solid. Yeah, right. It feels very solid, but yet it moves a little bit.
Staying alive. That was looped kick and snare, right?
Yeah. It's funny because I remember visiting Ken Calais, who was the engineer producer for Fleetwood Mac on the big records. And he was doing a remix for something, for an album. And he had Dreams, the big Fleetwood Mac hit up, Dreams. And I remember going down the line and soloing the different instruments to see what they'd be like. And I hit the hi-hat and I went, that's a hit. You can tell just from the hi-hat. It just sounded so solid. And I found out later that was a loop because even Mick Fleetwood couldn't play it right. So they had an 8-bar loop of that. Wow. And then he played the rest of it to the loop.
That's awesome.
But the point is that there was one thing that was completely solid and on the grid, and you felt that, and everything else could be off a little bit.
Okay, cool. Here's a question, or here's a frustration that comes in for Chris. He said, getting paid for work. So you certainly get that question. How do I make a living doing this music thing? You teach it as well. What are some basic answers you'd like to share about, that overall frustration?
If you're just starting, you have to do work for free. There's no way around it. Dave Pensato, everybody knows his track record. He told me recently that he wanted to start to do more rock music because that's where he came from, and he was doing all R&B and stuff. So he started to do mixes for free. Now, this is Dave Pensato at his level. The way he got back into doing that was by doing mixes for free. So the point is, you have to establish yourself by establishing yourself doing things for free, and then you can begin to charge after you have clients that really like what you do. If they don't like what you do, then it's going to be harder, obviously. But
yeah,
hopefully you're going to get good enough that, and you're going to get people that like what you're doing and are willing to pay for those services.
There's a term for that in business. It's called a loss leader. Although generally that refers to something, inexpensive and disposable.
Yeah.
But, it's that idea that you need to have something that is sort of a little bit free or a little bit under compensated for to open doors so that you can have opportunities come in and get paid well for what you do. There might be another element to that question. This could be somebody who is working and is charging, but they're just having trouble getting people to pay what's owed to them. Is that a frustration you sometimes hear? And have you heard people talk about good solutions for just, getting paid for what you did?
Yeah. I mean, that happens a lot in Hollywood, and it probably happens in Nashville and New York. And what would happen is you do something for a label and you have a hard time getting paid. Not that they won't pay you, but they'll pay you in 6 or 9 months, and you need the money now. So I've had a lot of people tell me that what they would do is they would just give a big discount. So, and what will happen is people's eyes will light up, and even accounting departments, their eyes will light up if they see a big enough discount, if they could pay right now. And that's what they do.
Adam Audio introduces the new A7V monitor for home and pro studios, the next generation of the incredibly popular A7X. The all-new A-series line of monitors delivers the same highly accurate, transparent sound and unique accelerated ribbon tweeter design that has made Adam Audio famous for over a decade, but now introduces new innovations such as the rotatable high-frequency propagation system waveguide, allowing the XART tweeter to disperse sound with controlled consistency, and DSP-based room correction and speaker voicings. Using the A-Control software or SonarWorks in a measurement mic, you can now integrate advanced filters directly onto the DSP on board the speaker to help compensate for imperfect room acoustics without introducing annoying latency or requiring plugins. This allows you to tune your monitors for your room, your mix position, and your ears anytime you want to meet your ever-evolving studio needs. Get the extended 5-year warranty for monitors that will improve as your studio improves at adamaudio.com. For 15 years, I recorded hundreds of bands like Jack White, Adele, and the Black Keys in my hay bale studio at the Bonnaroo Festival. I had to work fast and deliver finished mixes to the radio DJs within an hour, so I chose to use the solid-state Logic AWS 948 Plus for my mixing console. There's just no substitute for mixing on a real console. Until now, that is. SSL brings you the UF8 and UC1 controllers so that you can recreate the feel and speed of mixing on a console with the flexibility of mixing on your computer in your home studio. Paired with the SSL Channel Strip 2 and 4000B plugins, you can now get a world-class sound using real faders and real knobs to mix as fast as your ears will guide you. Levels, panning, EQ, and compression, they're all built right into the controllers. So go put the feeling back into your mixes at solidstatelogic.com. That's a good tip. Where have you seen people successfully offer that discount so that it gets seen? Is that a conversation people will have with somebody else, or is it just a simple bolded line in an invoice? Any mechanical, nerdy mechanical details like that you've noticed work well?
It's both. What will happen is, if you know this is going to happen and the people you're working with have a reputation of taking a long time to pay, then the best thing is you tell them up front. I said, this is the price. You pay me today, you pay me whenever, it's this price. Now, you have to hope that they're going to be ethical because, if you're working for some people that we know who they are without even mentioning, they may say, well, I'm just going to pay you this anyway and take a year to pay. So, you're hoping that you're working with ethical people.
Yeah. I guess, if you rewind a while, invoicing and getting paid was very paperwork oriented, and it could be pretty complicated. And you had to have a printer that you had to keep your phone line going so that you could use your printer as a fax machine occasionally, and all these ridiculous things. Now it's all, QuickBooks Online and invoices, which makes it convenient. But the flip side to that is email isn't always seen by people. It's like you send something somewhere and it just disappears in an email inbox. I mean, my email, when I open it up, it's overwhelming every time. And I don't think I'm alone in that. So one of the, maybe you've got some more thoughts about how to make sure that your email is getting opened like a physical letter. One of my tricks is just to simply use simple tools like Boomerang, or even the snooze button in Gmail, where it will cycle my email back to me in 2 days, and I see that it hasn't been opened or responded to, and I'll just simply say, "Hey, did this cross your radar?" That one seems to work because it's such a weird expression.
Yeah. No, that is good. Yeah.
Have you found clever ways to just kind of follow through with communication with people?
Yeah, the telephone.
Nice. Pick up the phone and call them.
Yeah,
Awesome.
yeah, right. And people aren't used to that anymore.
Yeah, good point. I had boy, this is sort of funny, but there was a company that I did a record, and the label had rented tape machine parts from this company, and the tape machine company wasn't getting the rental paid by the record label. And finally, it was a fax that had some expletives in big, bold words written right on it that finally caught their attention and got it paid. So sometimes you just got to do what you got to do.
Yeah.
Okay, here's one from Stephen Nolan saying frustration is being overwhelmed with how much there is to learn within the DAWs. I love recording, though, so it's not hard for me to want to be there or to be motivated. It's just a matter of knowing how to go about learning everything properly and learning how to do things correctly. How do you, with information overload and what can feel like steep learning curves, how do you navigate that, or what advice have you got?
Well, I can empathize with you because there are things that I don't know, working on Pro Tools for as long as I have, and I don't know everything about it. And sometimes I wish I did. And I think to myself, I should find out more about this feature. So, welcome to the club on that in a way. But I would say fundamentals never go away, and they work all the time, no matter what digital audio workstation you're working on, or you're working in the real world on a real console. The fundamentals are always the same. They never change. So learn those, good fundamentals of recording, meaning gain staging, good levels, mic placement, mic choice, things like that will be a big help to you. The DAW, just, if you have just the basic stuff down, that's enough to get going, and you learn along the way. Oh, I can do this too. Oh, yeah. Oh, I really want to learn how to do this, and you go a little deeper and find out.
Yeah.
The fundamentals don't go away.
Yeah. Fortunately, audio is based on physics, and that's not changing anytime soon, as far as I'm aware.
Yeah.
And then, unfortunately, software is written by people. And as someone who grew up learning how to, fix mechanical things and appreciating that, for the most part, an internal combustion engine operated the same in one car as it did in another, you could kind of understand how to do things. But when you get into software, it's just like whatever they felt like doing and the way it designed. I mean, look at something like WordPress. That was, sorry, PHP, which comes from, I think, personal homepage or something. It's like the breadcrumb trail for how software ends up where it is bizarre sometimes. It's just these weird stories. So, they're learning the DAW. Next year somebody comes along with a different DAW and they just they upgrade and they move the buttons on you too. That was always frustrating. Yeah. But I think that's smart advice, just like learning the basics and then just picking, this is the expression, just-in-time learning. When you want to learn how to do one thing, go learn how to do that one thing.
Yeah.
I spend a lot of time watching YouTube videos. Honestly, my TV is just a big YouTube entertainment center. And when I take food breaks, I'm always excited if I can remember what it was that I wanted to learn about. Cause then I'm like, thank God I can just turn on, YouTube and actually learn something instead of just watching some mind numbing video that pops up.
Yeah. Never
yours, Bobby. They're never mind numbing. They're all great. Okay, this comes in from Roland Dejean. I think if I'm pronouncing your name right. For me, it's achieving consistency in my mixes. What advice do you have for consistency in mixes?
Get a mastering engineer.
Nice.
Make friends with one. And I would say at least do this once. Get a mastering engineer. Before you send them anything, before you send the final mix, send some test mixes, send some rough mixes, and say, you're going to master this at the end, but I want to make sure I'm going in the right direction. How does it sound to you? And they'll come back and they'll say, well, you're a little shy at 250, way too much at 2K, whatever. They'll give you some suggestions, and that will enable you to zero in on everything. And then finally, when you do send it out, ask, what did you have to do? And that will tell you some of the problems that you have in your room and in your speakers and the way you're hearing. And that will, when you kind of figure that out, then you'll have more consistent mixes from there on. Now, here's the second thing. Maybe it should be the first, actually. Get some good reference mixes. So in other words, find some songs that you really like the sound of. And you know well, you've listened to them for a long, long time. And you can pick something out and you go, I really like the sound of the snare drum. Boy, the vocal sounds terrific in this. I really like the reverb in this. And then try your best to emulate those. And you won't get it exactly right, but you'll get in the ballpark. Or you'll get in the ballpark. Or I like the low end on this. Try to emulate it. And that will keep you sort of consistent because you have this goal that isn't changing. But a mastering engineer could be your really good friend. You don't have to use them all the time. You probably can't afford it, but it's worth to do it once.
Yeah, that's a good tip. And Rockstars, I would encourage you also to remember one of our previous guests on the show is Brian Murphy at soundporter.com. Let me make sure I get the URL right. Yeah, soundporter.com. And he encourages you to reach out to him and ask those very questions. So there's one immediate source you can try out. And other than that, yes, reach out to whoever your mastering engineer is and start the conversation. And I think also, Bobby, of the inconsistency in mixes within our own collection. So, I just recorded a female singer. It was just acoustic guitar and vocals, but very quickly I did kind of dialed up, quick, though slightly elaborate rough mixes. And I get to the end and I listen to the collection and there's no consistency just in that. So for me, the process is always allowing myself, just don't get hard on myself. Just know that I got to go back and listen to that collection of songs and immediately get the sense, sort of comparative listening, like you said, which is reference tracks. Your reference tracks can be your own rough mixes too, and make sure you're finding what your own ballpark is.
I'm glad you bring that up because about listening to different mixes, maybe within an album, that's the one thing that people overlook when they think of mastering. They think of, the EQ is going to make it a little fatter and there's going to be more compression. It's going to be louder. But yeah, it's that, but not really. There's more to it than that. It's, if you have 10 songs, you want to make sure they all fit together. And a mastering engineer is really good at that. And they'll do one and then they'll keep on comparing and they'll make sure that they all fit together. So that's the one thing that people constantly overlook about mastering that's super important. They're really good at that.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what they do. They just listen to it in context.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So let's see what else we got here. We're getting near the end, but if we got time for a couple more, we'll do it. Caleb Dietz asks and says, vocals are a frustration. For me, they are the most difficult and most important part to record. So what tips come to mind for you about recording great vocals?
Okay, this is a podcast. They're not going to be seeing this, are they?
We can use words to describe it.
Okay. So the best thing is distance, first of all, distance from the microphone. A vocalist does not have to be right up on the microphone, eating the microphone to sound good. And I usually give them a hand test. So in other words, I'll ask them to make a fist and I'll say, put it up against the microphone. And this is how far I want you to be away from it. Now, if that's even too close, I'll tell them to open up their full hand and I'll say, so Lidge can see this, what I'm doing. And I'll say,
yeah, so okay. Your thumb's sort of on your mouth there or chin, right?
Yeah. And stay this far away. Now, the good part about that is they'll constantly think about this as they're recording. You'll never have to say anything to them again, because what they'll do, and even if you went out and you put tape on the ground, that wouldn't matter because they lean in and out. But you do this, and now it's very consistent where they're going to be at. So that's one thing, keeping them in the right position all the time.
That's a great one. I'm going to follow that up too. And I'm going to say the hand thing, Rockstars, picture you're going, na, 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 and you put your hand up on your chin. It's one of those.
The other thing is the correct microphone companion to the voice. So just because you have a really expensive microphone or your most expensive microphone, it doesn't necessarily mean that that's the right match for the vocal. You should try every microphone that you have at your disposal, because you might be surprised. The one that works the best might be the cheapest one you have, but it will work perfect for this particular vocalist. And that's the first thing an engineer will do. They'll put up 5 microphones to see which works with the new vocalist. The other thing then is the pattern. Don't assume that a directional pattern is going to be great or perfect for the situation. Omni might work incredibly well. Now, just to illustrate that, when I was first in LA as a young engineer, I started to get hired a lot just to do vocals. And people like my vocal sound. And there was no trick to it, although I didn't tell people. I just put the microphone in Omni. So if it was an 87, which is what people were using at the time, I put it in Omni, and it just made it really easy. It gave it a really nice open sound. The frequency response is actually better because there's no proximity effect, and people love the sound. So don't be afraid to try different patterns and see if one is better.
That's smart. And one of the things that I remember being struck by as I learned about Omni is you think of Omni instinctively as like, oh, it's going to be really, really roomy sounding. But the thing that you gain with Omni is you gain the ability to get closer on the mic because there is no proximity effect. So you can actually take an Omni mic and get so close to the source that the source volume goes up much more. And you can actually be surprised at how much the room is not an issue with Omni.
Yeah.
I remember doing drums in my dead room, and I just default set up my tube. They were the CV3s from Mic Tech, facing down in cardioid. And I was listening. I was like, they sound great, but it's just a little too edgy on the cymbals, a little too harsh. And then I was like, well, what happened if I switched them in Omni? Because the roof right above the mics was dead anyway. It was like soft surface. Put them in Omni, smooth, just totally smoothed out the frequency response on the cymbals. Same thing when I used to record with my Earthworks microphones. Those were pretty roomy because I put those in the big space with the drums. But wow, the cymbals just sounded so natural and pure. It was pretty amazing. Yeah. I know that's not a vocal answer, but I think it's the same idea, right?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, cool. All right. How about this one from Axel? Not being able to get the sounds I hear in my head.
Yeah, well, welcome to the club. That happens a lot where you hear something and you can't, what would be the word? You can't create it. And you can get close, you can't get the exact same thing. Yeah, that's not uncommon.
Do you feel like the time you've spent watching YouTube videos, trying out mix tricks, and tweaking version after version of your mixes has not gotten you anywhere? Have you been looking for a simple or straightforward step-by-step process for creating a pro mix that won't take years to learn? What if you could learn that process from a Grammy-winning mix engineer who understood all your mixing struggles and could coach you through them? If you struggle with any of these questions, then the Ultimate Mixing Masterclass is for you. Now you can discover a proven step-by-step mix system from Grammy-winning mixer Craig Alvin. for consistently creating a pro-quality mix from your home studio that will sound amazing everywhere. Here's a quote from one of the students. Absolutely the most informative and helpful block of information mentoring on the mix process I've ever been a part of. This was like sitting behind a mix engineer for years, watching and picking up tips along the way, condensed into a 6 to 7 hour session. Look, when you're ready to take your mixes to Grammy-winning quality, then go to ultimatemixingmasterclass.com and go check out Craig's ultimate snare mixing trick now for free. I think there's a couple of thoughts that come to mind for me with that too. Is yes, it's not about hearing it in our head and nailing that exact thing. It's about hearing it in our head, and that motivates us to take the next step. And then we have to learn how to listen to what's actually happening as a result of what we're doing and respond to that, right? So for me, when you're thinking, what should we do next on this track? Should I go try this instrument? Should I go try that instrument? That opens up a can of like a Pandora's box where you can end up with tons of overdubs that don't do anything for the track. But in those situations, if you can hear an idea first and then go, "Ooh, I got a cool idea for a background harmony," and then go out and do it, it's much more likely to stick. Although it probably won't sound exactly like it. You heard it in your head, but you can find something. But it's an interesting thing. And I'm glad we talked about it, because I mean, that is how we do cross that bridge a lot in the studio.
Yeah. I think the other thing too is sometimes what'll happen is you'll hear it and you'll kind of know how to get there, but not quite. And a lot of it has to do with experience, because the more experience you have, the easier it is to say, "Oh, I know what that is," and go for it. The plug-in, the instrument, whatever, the microphone, whatever it is. But when you don't have that experience, then, you have to try everything to try to get it. The thing about it is, when you're doing a major label project and that happens, you, for the most part, have the time to do that. And if you're on a substantial budget, if it takes you a week, you have the time to be able to do it. Now, obviously, you wouldn't want to take a week, but I'm exaggerating there. But nonetheless, you do have the time to experiment until you get it. So but of course, if you don't have the time, if you don't have the budget, if you don't have the experience, then, it's tougher.
And I would also add to that what we hear in our head is not always better. I think about the many times where I take a mix and I go listen in the car and I'm like, "Oh, I need to do less bass mix." And I go do the less bass mix and I go listen in the car. I'm like, "Yeah, but that sucks. The one that I thought I needed to change is better. And that's actually the best mix. And that's the one I should use, So sometimes what you hear in your head should stay there. Same thing with harmonies, right? Sometimes you don't need to add that other voice.
Yeah.
Sometimes that voice should be left up to the listener as an imagination. Give them somewhere to go. All right. Last one, and then we'll close out here. Chaz says, he just says, the More Me headphone Q mix solutions. Do you have any thoughts about stuff that you've seen in that world of musicians wanting More Me? Have you seen great solutions? Are there bigger issues like what you need isn't more me, what you need is more of everybody else?
Yeah, musicians in general are not good at getting their own headphone mixes. They have a hard time if left up to just saying, "Okay, there it is, go do it." They're unhappy most of the time.
Yeah, and if you really want to find that out, hand them an actual Mackie mixer and say, "Make yourself a mix."
So the best thing is to build one, even if it's a More Me mixer. Make sure you build one. Maybe just build it, make it stereo. And the More Me is, okay, now I can dial in my microphone, my part, whatever it is. But even then, you have to make sure that, they don't go too much one way or too much the other. You got to be able to hear everybody else in order to stay in time, in order to blend with the track, to do what you got to do. So that's really important. You can't have too much me.
Yeah, or you'll end up like my fiddle on my first band.
Yeah, there you go.
What about actual mix? More me mixers. Have you seen some that have been out there before that are great? Maybe they're not still sold, or seen ones that are being sold today that you think are pretty awesome?
I used to own one, and for the life of me, I can't think of the name of it now.
Was it one of the Furmans or something like that? Or?
It wasn't a Furman, but it's like that, and it was one of the first ones that are out. They're still around. I can't think of the name, but anyway, that worked really well. And what I would do, I think there was 8 channels on it, and what we do is we give them a stereo mix of most everything, and then some vocals, some background vocals on the track and then the bass, so they can move that up and down a little bit, and whatever else was important. And that was enough. But again, the best thing is go out, set the mix for them.
Yeah.
So they don't have to think about it and do it. And then just say, okay, this is you. So be careful. Don't make it too loud.
Yeah. I do have a couple of thoughts. One is I have found myself thinking, I'm making a good mix. This should work for you. If it sounds good out of the speakers, then that's a good representation of all the music, and therefore you guys should be hopefully responding to each other. But then I've also learned to remember, but when you go out and you're standing next to the drums that are in the room, you really do need a different thing in your headphones at times. And so, I find myself needing to trust what people are telling me. That's important. It's always good to listen to what people are telling you, because they're usually right about their experience. And then also remembering to go out, like you said, and just put on the headphones and see what they're actually hearing in their headphones, because it's amazing how bad it can sound sometimes. And they didn't know that it wasn't right, and so they didn't know to tell me it wasn't right.
Yeah, I've been a victim of this on both sides, actually, where you didn't spend enough time getting the headphone mix right. And what I found is in every major studio that I worked in that had assistants that were really good, that would be number one. The first thing is they would take care of the headphone mix, and that would be their primary job. Get the headphone mix sounding right.
Yeah. Yeah. Groovy. All right. And then Chaz, if you're actually thinking of brands, I think of old school analog ones as like Furman and Private Q, I think, although that could be still going now. And then Hear Technologies and the Hearback Pro.
That's what system. I had. I had a Hear system.
Yeah, that I've been checking out the Hearback Pro, and that seems really excellent now. So, and then there are other ones like PreSonus makes a 16-channel one. But I think some of the challenges are making sure that whatever you use sounds loud and clear enough that, especially if you're going to be with a rock band, that like a drummer could use it, for example.
I have a friend that actually bought a monitor console. So a small one, but nonetheless a monitor console. So he can make individual mixes for every player. And that way he can make sure that everybody got exactly what they wanted.
And it was an analog console.
It was an analog console, yeah.
So one thing to remember, Rockstars, too, if you are using digital headphone mixers, is just be aware that digital can add latency. And so you're going to have to make sure that it's an appropriate amount and not too much and stuff. Cool, Bobby. Well, thank you for being on the show with us again, man. It's great to hang with you. I have one closing question for you, which I've asked before, but we'll ask it again. We're going to take the Wayback Studio machine, and you get to go back in time and find young Bobby, and you say, hey, dude, listen, I've come back in time to give you this one bit of advice. First of all, just giving you a heads up, you're going to still be good looking when you get older, but here you are as a young man, and I've come back to tell you that here's the single most important thing you need to know to be a rock star of the recording studio yourself one day. What advice would you like to go back and give yourself if you could?
Well, the first half of my professional career, I was a guitar player, and I would have gone back and said, you got to shed more.
Not shed hair or fur.
Yes, right. In other words, I should have practiced more and spent more time on my instrument than I did.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting because, some of those questions coming in were just about that. Like, how do I learn these tools? And how do you think you would have shed more if you were feeling busy and like your cup was full during that process?
Well, you just have to make time, and the greatest do. They figure out how to do it. I mean, you can go back to Charlie Bird and people like that, where Charlie Bird would spend his 10 hours a day, in a closet practicing.
Yeah, I remember hearing that even during as the session was beginning, he was just off in the corner practicing until it was time to step in front of the mic.
And especially now, you need, well, I shouldn't say that, because if you want to be a session player, if you want to be go out on the road, you need a certain level of dexterity. So what people get away with many times in the studio today is they don't have that particular level of dexterity that was more common back then. But you need it if you're going to compete on a professional level like that.
Well, I dig that, and I'm reminded of the lessons of Olympic athletes that are training, where at an elite level, you're just trying to improve 1% at a time each time. And so if we can find, that's a little bit of my answer to my question too, which is when you feel like you don't have time to do something that feels big, like learning a whole bunch of new stuff, go learn a little bit. Just go learn a little bit each time.
Yeah.
Go practice a little bit. Go shed a little bit more. Although I guess shedding is sort of like shut everything else out.
Yeah.
So
right.
what is the term is meant, like go out to the woodshed and just live in it and play your instrument until you get good enough to come back out?
Well, yes, it used to be woodshedding. That was the original term. And then it was
just shedding. Now it's just an aluminum shed.
Yeah. Right.
Awesome. Bobby, well, thank you so much for being on the show, man. It's great to see you as always. Please let the rock stars know where can they go, check out more of your amazing stuff. And what if they are, ready to join up and start making hit records? Where should they go?
The easiest thing is to go to bobbyowsinski.com, and from there you can find my books, my blogs, my podcasts, my courses. But that's the hub where it all starts. So bobbyowsinski.com.
People do like freebies. You got any freebies over there?
Oh, there's a ton of them. And just go to, on the top menu, go to the far right. It says freebies.
Oh, nice. All right.
Yeah.
That actually wasn't a loaded question. I didn't realize you had a menu item called freebies. That's perfect. Yeah. All right, rock stars. Also, remember to click down through that playlist and listen to the records that Bobby remixed and surround, because they are awesome. Thin Lizzy's even in there. Come on. Get out of here. That's awesome. Bobby, thank you so much, dude. We'll see you around the studio. Rockstars, we'll see you. And thanks for listening, everybody. Cheers, Bobby.
Thanks, Lidge.
Thanks so much for listening to Recording Studio Rockstars. If you enjoyed the show and want to help make it better, then please share this episode with your friends on social media and leave a rating and review on iTunes to help the podcast reach more rock stars like yourself. You can click directly over to iTunes or go to rsrockstars.com/review for an easy explanation. And remember to hit the subscribe button to keep up with weekly episodes. And if you're ready to make your best record ever now, then head over to Recording Studio Rockstars Academy, where you can start with my free course at mixmasterbundle.com. And if you want more free content from Recording Studio Rockstars, all you have to do is go to rsrockstars.com/email. Again, that's rsrockstars.com/email to enter your name and email, and I'll keep you in the loop with articles, videos, podcast updates, and even free gear giveaways for your studio. Just look for the link in the show notes below. Thanks so much for listening, and thanks for being a rock star. I'm Lidge Shaw, and this is Recording Studio Rockstars. Now, go make great music. Recording Studio Rockstars would like to give a big thank you to our awesome sponsors who help make this episode possible. OWC, Spectra 1964, JZ Microphones, Atom Audio, Solid State Logic, and Isotope. Remember to use these coupon codes for special discounts. At isotope.com/rockstars, use the coupon code ROCK10 for 10% off any plugin purchase, or start your extended 30-day free trial subscription description for access to many plugins. At jzmic.com, use the code ROCKSTAR for 40% off the V47, V67, and V12 microphones. That's what you're hearing my voice on right now. At recordingstudiorockstars.com/academy, use the coupon ROCKSTAR for 10% off any course for a limited time. If you enjoyed Recording Studio Rockstars, then please check out our sponsors using the link in our show notes, because it's a great way to help support this show. These are all things I highly recommend for your studio, and they're going to help you make your best record ever. I would also like to thank our fantastic team here at Recording Studio Rockstars, Vlad Weselchenko, Braden Stremming, and John Richardson, for additional podcast and video production. Thanks so much for listening, Rockstars, and we'll see you in the next episode. Cheers.